Montreal is undergoing an urbanist revolution. It has incredible modern cycle tracks, new public and pedestrianized spaces, one of the most beautiful metro systems in the Americas, and a new suburban train system that will be one of the most modern in the world. But the existing regional train system, well, it's disappointing. But it doesn't need to be, and in today's video I'm going to talk about how Montreal got here and where it should be going in the future. How it could actually turn the EXO rail system into something to be proud of. In the past 5 years, Toronto's GO transit system has grade-separated lines, built modern stations, and massively ramped up service so that there are now hourly trains to towns in York Region, Brampton, Hamilton, and all kinds of other places, as well as several bi-directional trips every day to far-flung locations like Niagara, London, and Barrie. And in the past 5 years, Montreal's rail system has rebranded, and in the next few years or so, the suburban routes into Toronto are going to start running every 10 minutes or better. And even the farther flung destinations are likely to see trains about every hour or so, which will allow you to travel across much of southern Ontario quickly and in pretty good comfort. You can really see the impact this is having when you look at the Kitchener line in Toronto compared to the Saint-Jérôme line in Montreal. On a Monday, you can go from Mount Pleasant Station to downtown Toronto on 18 different trains, with some of them even traveling express, and during the midday period, there's hourly service both directions between downtown Toronto and Mount Pleasant. Meanwhile, the Saint-Jérôme line has only 14 trains a day, and while the Kitchener line has an incredible trajectory that will see it getting far more service with new tunnels and stations needing commissioning soon, the Saint-Jérôme line has been pretty stagnant. But things get even worse on the weekend, where the Kitchener line has hourly service in both directions all day long. The Saint-Jérôme line has just 6 trains. And while the Kitchener line isn't GO's best, the Saint-Jérôme line isn't even EXO's worst. Now to me, it sort of feels like EXO and its predecessor AMT, Montreal's commuter rail operator, because to be clear now, Montreal mainly just has train services which go in the morning and out in the evening, has been going through the motions for the last decade or so. The metro has creeped further into the suburbs, and the REM has completely taken over one of EXO's main lines, while other branches has made some services feel somewhat redundant. This is such a problem that I've had lots of transit supportive people go to Montreal and then tell me, wow, that system is really bad. They just don't run very much service. So is there really anything that can be done to make it a better system? I personally think so. There is a niche for EXO to fill, but it's got to lean into it and make some big changes if it does want to remain relevant. While the REM and the Metro do provide and will provide good service to the inner suburbs, and in some cases destinations beyond that, they aren't going to be particularly comfortable for super long trips, particularly to satellite towns, with their capacity-oriented train designs and hard plastic seats. While they also have a speed disadvantage to regional rail, which can travel at up to 150 kilometers per hour, much faster than even the REM. So let's talk about what this niche should look like. And if you enjoy this video, make sure to subscribe and turn on all notifications for more Montreal-related content. Here's my vision. Right now, the EXO network has 5 lines, which travel an average of 30 to 40 kilometers out of the city center of Montreal, more or less in all directions, connecting to various suburbs and outlying towns. But they could be far better. The EXO 4 line could be extended to the southeast, EXO 3 to the east, EXO 5 to the north and the west, with branches which could be served by trains which split in half at the branch point, sort of with like German S-Bahn systems, and an extension of EXO 2 further north towards Mont-Tremblant. Given the presence of the new West Island branch of the REM, some of the stations on the West Island EXO 1 could be removed to provide a faster, more compelling service for people further down the line. Now, in the past, all but one of these routes has, at least for some portion of time, run into Lucien Lallier, Montreal's second downtown rail station on the west side of downtown. And I think it would be valuable in the medium term to get all of the EXO lines traveling into Lucien Lallier. That way you'd have a single connection point between all of the various regional train lines into Montreal. Now, to do this, we would have to get 2 of the lines which don't currently travel into Lucien Lallier to connect to it. To do this on EXO 3, I'd suggest building a new rail connection somewhere near the Turcotte interchange, as well as probably building a new REM and EXO interchange station which could be surrounded by TOD in Point St. Charles to provide connections for EXO 3 riders into Gare Centrale if that's their actual final destination. At the same time, I propose building a track connection between EXO 5 and EXO 2, so that EXO 5 could travel into Lucien Lallier using the same tracks as EXO 2. With these changes in place, I'd hope for a long-term plan of running all 5 EXO routes every hour into Lucien-Lallier, with trains from all lines ideally arriving just a few minutes apart and then departing about 10 minutes after that, providing for a pulsed connection that would allow people to travel not only into the city and out of it, but also across the entire region, with a short connection time at Lucien-Lallier where they could walk from one train platform to another, get on their train, and be on their way. During peak periods, this could happen twice hourly, providing additional capacity necessitated by additional peak hour commuters, however many there still are post-COVID. With this service goal, we'd be able to design a clear plan for more rail capacity that could be built out sequentially over time, by adding additional tracks and platforms in places where half-hourly outbound trains meet half-hourly inbound trains. This should be fairly cost-effective, and EXO can use the Go Transit proven approach of building their own dedicated tracks in freight rail corridors. And even better, 3 out of the 5 EXO routes operate over CN, and CN Railway has shown itself to be quite friendly to Go Transit, even operating hourly service over its own tracks. Now, with all of these changes to service, stations would feel even more tired than they already do. And so I'd suggest that key stations be upgraded with better transit connections, full canopies over the platforms, like you see at many new Go Transit stations, and probably some new transit-oriented development, since a lot of the lines don't exactly travel through the most central areas of the towns they serve. Fortunately, thanks to the RAM, we now sort of have a model for how that could happen. Montreal could potentially even leapfrog Toronto by building diversion tracks around stations that allow freight trains to go around and passenger trains to stop and provide that sweet level boarding. Now, Lucien-Lallier becoming much better served and far more important should be completely redesigned. Right now it sort of feels like a shed attached to the side of the Bell Center. It's not great. A new properly sized concourse could replace the ends of the current platforms and tracks, basically sitting over Rue de la Montagne, while a second underground linear one could be built next to Rue Lucien-Lallier, connecting directly into the metro system. Both of these concourses could provide direct access onto new, wider platforms, and the entire station could be enclosed in an attractive and dramatic canopy that not only provides weather protection, but also just makes it a standout location. With these nicer stations, more service, and level boarding, new European-style regional trains could be acquired, be it Alstom Linz, Siemens Desiros, or Stadler Flirts. These trains could potentially have dual-mode capability, allowing them to be powered by overhead wires on core parts of the network and on sections of line built by EXO dedicated for passenger trains, with diesel or battery operation in areas that aren't initially electrified. This would not only reduce emissions, which is a key goal of a regional train network, but also improve performance, so trains could accelerate faster and provide faster trips. These trains could also have nice, large areas for people to store bikes on board, reflecting the Montreal region's bike friendliness, and with low floors and level boarding, they would be way easier than the current trains to get your bike onto and off of, not to mention people in wheelchairs or with strollers. Since such trains tend to have shorter articulated cars and better performance than locomotive-hauled trains, they could also navigate tighter curves, which would be useful for building those track connections I mentioned earlier. Such train designs would also allow for sections of elevated tracks, similar to what you see in Ottawa with the O train. This would allow you to build dedicated passenger tracks and platforms in places where you absolutely couldn't find space next to the existing freight ones. Trains could start short and be extended over time with additional units coupled together, as you see in other parts of the world. But with more service all day long, at least initially, demand would probably be lighter as it spread across the day. These changes, which when phased in would not need to be that expensive, would be transformative for EXO, creating a high-quality regional rail network for the Montreal region, and allowing you to go on trips that aren't just commuting into the downtown core for work, but going to see mom and dad in the town outside of the city, or going to an event, or just starting off your bikepacking trip out in the suburbs where it's a little more comfortable to cycle. And yes, also serve people commuting into and out of the city. But I'll say much more conveniently, because if you want to leave early or stay late, you can do so because there would be far more train service. What's great about this plan too is that it could be extended into the future. If demand was high enough, in the long term, Lucien-Lallier could be a starting point for a cross-city regional rail tunnel for Montreal, sort of like in Milan. This could travel from the west end of downtown to Gare Centrale, Place des Arts, Mile End, and Rosemont, allowing for a more direct route into the city for the northern 2 EXO lines, while also serving much of the demand that has been built up for the Pink Line. And it would be able to immediately make use of the dual-mode trains already operating on other services. while also providing more train frequency and express trips within the city similar to Paris's RER. And with a city center tunnel, over time, as demand on those suburban and regional branches increased, you could add additional tracks and operate services to the north up to every 5 minutes per line, and services to the south up to every 7.5 minutes per line, which would allow for massive capacity. You could even use the tracks currently used by EXO2 as well as a branch coming out of the city center tunnel to run a looping service around the mountain with new stations, sort of like the London Overground. All in all, the plan I described in this video is quite optimistic, but it could be built in phases, and none of the phases really seem like inconceivable advances from the last. Ultimately though, this is the type of thing that Montreal needs to aspire to, if we don't want Toronto to be the only city in Canada with a good regional train network. Thanks for watching.